Hey everybody, it's Aluna Michaels, Esoteric Astrologer, coming at you to talk about July of 2024. Thanks as always to the guys on the Know Thyself podcast. Thank you so much for chatting about me and stuff, sending me great people. Okay, so there's a lot happening this month, some just kind of tricky and some really cool. So let's just start with we just had a new moon. I'm doing this on is it the 7th today? I'm so sorry it gets later in the month when I'm making these, but we just had a new moon on the 5th, right? Sun and moon in Cancer. So a new moon is when the sun and the moon are conjunct, close together. And since even in June, Venus and the sun have been traveling really close together. Now, the sun, Venus and Mercury are always pretty close to the sun. They're never more than a degree, a sign, it can't be more than a certain amount of degrees away from the sun. But, so they're not like more like, it can't be like 6 signs away, either Mercury or Venus from the sun. But Venus has been traveling really close with the sun. So it's been conjuncting the sun really closely for a while, which is, the sun is people's hearts, personalities, and like true self, and Venus is love. So that's been a nice vibe that's been happening, and it's continuing in through July. They're going to start separating. Venus will start separating away. But when we have the new moon, the Venus is right in there as well. So the moon is emotions. And so we get the sun and Venus and the moon all in Cancer, and then Saturn trining those. So Saturn's in Pisces, another water sign. So that's a really nice vibe. Saturn is very stabilizing, so it can really stabilize your emotions, stabilize relationships, also things about finances, especially because it's in the sign of Cancer, things like self-care, family issues. It's like things can really you can have a good perspective on all these things and not be super reactionary. And Saturn also can be about making plans about things, like how to progress relationships or how to support people, how to support your own dreams. And, because Cancer is an interesting sign because it's all about helping others, but also there's something about, the circularity of the sign of Cancer, like those 2 little claws going, right? That you're getting self-care as well. And the more you give yourself care or feel that your own needs are being supplied, you can help others even more. So because sometimes Cancers can tend toward kind of codependency. So with these signs this way, saying for everybody, the more self-care you have, the more you're giving out to others and really making a commitment to yourself about that. That could be a recommitment to yoga or healthy eating or sleeping patterns and things like that. And then seeing the great results of that and saying, okay, this is how we can do this. So even though that transit doesn't last very long, it can leave an impression in yourself and a commitment to yourself, especially because Saturn is sitting still for so long because it just retrograded, and then it will come back to that same point even in February and kind of recall this new moon and say, okay, let me make sure I'm still on track with, again, the self-care. The more steady I am, the more I can give to others. So that's nice. And what gets a little tricky is with the full moon, it's almost like, not quite the opposite, but so of course with a full moon, we have sun opposed moon. So emotions can be more in a heightened space. And let me just see here, because at that time, let me see, so the moon, okay. Even though the moon will be in, so of course the sun is in Leo, and the moon is, the sun will be actually the very end of Cancer, and the moon will be very end of Capricorn. But we've got Pluto in Aquarius right there. So basically early degrees of Aquarius, and then the moon at the late degrees of Capricorn. We're putting that sun opposed Pluto and the moon conjunct Pluto, which is more raw. And so it's nice that we first have this Venus stuff, which is really compassionate, and then there's like a digging into your subconscious. Let's even say this is about personal growth. Having that layer of compassion laid over everything. And then with that full moon, which is the 21st, it can really dredge things up from your psyche that you want to release. It could be about past things in relationships, so you could, not that you would be giving everyone too much latitude about bad stuff that's gone on, but being able to release situations with compassion while still having healthy boundaries, or things that you have been angry about yourself, you could face them clearly and squarely, but not like in a self bludgeoning way, because there's that, kind of framework of compassion around these things. So, and the other thing is that Mars is also going to be in that picture with Uranus. So it's like we got the full moon doing that Pluto stuff, dredging up, and then Mars will be conjuncting Uranus through the middle of July. Now, on a good level, Mars is taking action and Uranus is really bold, so when they conjunct like that, it's like, let's get going on stuff. You could start new projects and feel invigorated about things. But there's also an edginess to it. And also at that point, Mercury is going to be in Leo, which is making a square to both. So Mercury's how you think about things. It can be how you're communicating with people. So there's a little more rawness there in the middle of the month. And so it's like taking that, again, compassion with safe boundaries into some sort of dicier situations in the middle of the month, and how you can balance feeling aggressive toward people or dealing with people's energies, and how to, have that balance of spirituality, but not getting into, again, that codependent kind of thing. So it's an interesting dance. Hopefully that makes sense what I'm saying. And then the Mars Uranus kind of stays, well, it's pretty much, let's say that Mars Mercury stuff would be from like July 10th to the 21st at Mercury, Mars, Uranus. And so watching out for the temptation to slip out of that compassionate nature, but also being able to be confrontational with safe boundaries, I suppose would be the way to say that. Still being clear and strong, but not being, off the rails or whatever. But it's an interesting set of tension points. Some of you get really interested in Mercury retrograde, which will be happening in early August. We go into what we call the window of Mercury retrograde. So what that means, for those of you who don't follow this stuff, in August, Mercury will go retrograde at 4 degrees of Virgo, which is going to be around the 4th of August. It goes backwards till the 21 degrees of Leo. So you say, okay, where is it 21 degrees of Leo before the retrograde, which is what Mercury will be traversing backwards over. And that's going to be on the 17th of July. So we go into this Mercury retrograde window, which some people find more uncomfortable than the actual Mercury retrograde. And it's right at that time where the Mercury squaring the Uranus and Mars. So it's interesting test about how do I stay poised, especially if it's, again, stuff you want to grow up with yourself personally, like cutting yourself some slack or getting back on track with your goals and whatnot. But because Mercury retrograde also has that idea of bringing up old stuff. So if it's, you're really making this commitment to yourself, and then it's like, all these temptations to just go back to the old ways of being mean to yourself in your head or whatever, and say, okay, this is great information that's coming up from my subconscious. What can be really good is writing in a journal about these things, and sort of, I don't know if it's welcoming them and saying, okay, what's in that subconscious, and just say, okay, I'm ready to deal with this stuff, and see why you self-sabotage yourself or things like that, and just kind of look at it sort of point blank, and maybe also in a rational way, because that Saturn is still kind of operating, which gives a sense of distance from all of this reactivity of the Mars, Uranus, Mercury, and say, okay, I can see what's in this subconscious box and get rid of these sort of tripwires internally, so it can be very, very fruitful time. The other thing going on is, which gives more courage to all of this, is even though Mars is working with Uranus and Mercury in a funny way, Mars will be trining Pluto. So that's a really good angle. We have Mars in Gemini, making this 120-degree angle to Pluto in Aquarius. So air with air. And I always say Pluto is like Mars's big brother, So because Mars can be about plans or about courage, but Pluto is like sustaining the courage, sustaining the action, following through. And because of Mars being in Gemini, again, it can be really positive words to yourself, because Gemini is all about communication. So it can be like walking your talk. If you, really want to believe in the best for yourself and the best for your life, even if it's not manifested yet, staying committed to thinking positive towards yourself, sticking to your goals. So again, what I like about that Mars also working with Pluto is it kind of works to sustain that stuff with the Sun, Moon, Venus trining Saturn in the beginning of the month. So even if there's these rocky waters with the Mercury, Mars, Uranus, the Mars Pluto is like, okay, we still got this, So I love that. And definitely working with affirmations and affirmations that are believable. There's something, I think I've talked before about an idea called the thought ladder, which is, when you try to make an affirmation, sometimes it's so far out of your belief system that it causes what they call cognitive dissonance. If you really don't believe you could get a job making $1 million a year or something, it's like your brain's like if you say the affirmation, your brain's like, I don't think so. I'm not ready to even believe that. So a thought ladder is like, I believe I could get a higher paying job, and that would be the first step on the ladder. And your brain will be like, okay, I can believe that. Or I believe I can get a job making, $1,000 more a year or something. Like, okay, I can affirm that. And then you keep sort of growing in that belief. And then one of the next steps on the thought ladder could be, I believe there's people that make $1 million a year, because there are. And then, but instead of I make $1 million a year, so I'm stepping up this thought ladder, kind of retraining your brain to think bigger and to believe bigger about yourself. So sometimes with the Saturn working and even that Mars Pluto with the Mars being in Gemini, committing to say, I can believe one step higher than where I'm at. And I don't have to force myself way up and just be like, well, that's stupid, and then abandon affirmations, So that could be about relationship things, about health goals, about spiritual goals. And even if it were something like, I want to practice yoga an hour a day. Maybe your schedule doesn't allow for that. Maybe you're someone who's inconsistent with stuff, but you could say, I'm willing to do yoga 5 minutes a day. Or, on Sundays I do yoga for 20 minutes. And you stick with that and believe that and put that in your schedule, and then add as it goes and just say, this is good enough. And if you get inspired to do 20 minutes every day, good, but all I need to do is that 20 minutes once a week. And that can be part of that Mars Pluto working as well, and stating to yourself, I'm going to do this, because the Mars in Gemini can also be how you fit actions into your daily schedule or weekly schedule. So accepting the small steps, so you don't have to go all or nothing, and that's what's a great thing about Mars trining Pluto, is it's a sustained action. It doesn't have to be because Mars sometimes burns out too fast because it's too big of a concept or somehow unsustainable for you. Okay, so the other thing we've got is Neptune has just gone retrograde. And what's really interesting is Neptune's in a sign for 14 years. It's been in Pisces for nearly 14 years now. And that's its own planet, its own sign, excuse me. So Neptune rules Pisces. And interestingly, it's the first time since we've discovered Neptune that it's been in Pisces. I think that's right, because Neptune is a 200-year orbit. We discovered it in the late, I don't know. I think there's something where it hasn't done this very often, and I have to check my facts, so I wasn't ready for that and remembering the discovery of Neptune. But it's, I think maybe it was discovered the last time Neptune was in Pisces. So this might be the first time as a species we've experienced it consciously being in Pisces the whole time. But Neptune is retrograde at 29 degrees of Pisces, the final degree. So, pretty soon it will pop into Aries, which is a real big deal when Neptune changes signs. But for now, it's like, okay, I'm on the very edge of that sign and pulling back. And that was the retrograde happened right at the first few days of July. So Neptune and Pisces both about spirituality, about higher dreams for yourself, sort of imaginings, whereas Pluto's about goals I can attain. Neptune's like the dream. And so one of those things is to be able to, again, like working with these bigger picture things about yourself, but having the patience of how they manifest. And there's something about that lesson of Neptune being at that very last degree, which is so excitable, kind of, and pulling back. It's like dreams can still manifest even if they're taking time, even if there's setbacks, even if there's sort of a reorientation of a little bit of back to the drawing board, because Pisces and Neptune are about imagining how it happens and not being discouraged about rearranging or kind of pulling back and then making a cleaner, clearer path. So I like how there's that sense of patience of the Neptune going retrograde at the final degree, kind of casting over the whole month. So hopefully all that made sense, because it's a bit of, I don't want to say mixed signals, but all these different kinds of threads that are happening. But I always think, just that theme of self-compassion, and while still moving forward, so I like that theme of the Saturn and with that Mars, how those are activated so much about, I'm doing it, but I'm patient, and I'm not letting self-sabotage creep in, but if it does creep in, I'm kind to myself and then still move forward. And all that sense of balance of the month is really intriguing. So okay, so hope you followed all that. Give me some comments if you did. But so if you want a session with me, best way to get me is to text or call 248-583-1663. My website's below, lunamichaels.com if you want a session. And sometimes I don't see the YouTube comments, so when you leave comments, sorry if I don't get to those for a while. But so enjoy the month and keep loving yourself, and keep believing in the things you're doing are making a difference in your growth. And well, bye-bye for now. See you next month.